And welcome, people. How's everybody doing? Welcome back. I'm just going to wait for a couple more people to turn up. People know the running order now and how things work around here. Yes, what are people's experience with FM synthesis this week? Should be interesting to find out. Yeah, this week is all about FM synthesis. So this is my weekly sound design sessions live stream on ADSR. But of course, you can always come back and watch it later on the channel. Hello to the usuals on the chat. I'm sure you all know who you are. I'm really looking forward to this one, actually. I was preparing some notes for today, and FM synthesis honestly is such a rabbit hole to go down in terms of sound design and exploration and stuff like that. It can be confusing, but I think people can make it confusing. It's actually quite simple when you start to break it down, especially if you have a virtual synth that makes it visual, so for that reason, I've got a couple of different resources. For today's stream, as you can see, DX7 from the Arturia V collection, and I've also got a very old one here, FM8. Yeah, I see someone already saying FM8. Yes, Volca FM's a cool little cheap unit, piece of hardware, that's awesome. There's loads of other tools that are really good, but again, like I said, such a huge thing to explore. I think in terms of keeping things simple, although these are by no means simple, they just illustrate the point really well. Within the advanced menu here, there's a lot of stuff we can do with the DX7, and same for the FM8, even though it's an old plugin with a horribly dated graphic interface. There is Yuhi Basil, if I'm saying that right, not the herb, the actual name of the synth. And then there's also stuff like Phase Plant, which is quite a beast from kilohertz. But I think that might be just a little bit too much for this one stream. This is by no means a beginner sound design or synthesis stream, but I guess it is the first step into the world of FM. So yeah, it should be a lot of fun. So let us know where you're tuning in from today, guys. This should be a really fun one. Basic sine wave there just to make sure everyone can hear things nice and clear. And yeah, it was a good week last week for streams. Some lucky winner had the one Pigments version 3, which is cool. So I hope that you've enjoyed that. Rod Marconi, great, that's good to hear. Good to have people here who are, familiar with it and not familiar with it. Mostly experience with Operator. I haven't got any experience with Operator myself because I'm a Studio One guy. I did have a little bit of time in Ableton, and that was sort of before I'd even had a chance to delve into that, to be honest. Aurora FM from Audio Nebula. But not okay, I'll definitely check that out. Thank you for the recommendation. So the running order for today, guys, is I've got a little breakdown here. If you're watching this in post after the live stream, we can maybe try and drop some timestamps or something in. There's lots of little features here, but we're just going to, first of all, discuss what is FM synthesis and why should you be utilizing it and why should you be aware of it. Then we're going to look at the benefits, the drawbacks of FM synthesis, and then what are we using for today's stream, and maybe a little tiny bit of history around them. That'll just be the first sort of 10 minutes because it's mainly talking. If you want to be looking at the actual sound design process, we've got a lot to get into. We're going to be looking at the terminology. So the difference between subtractive and FM synthesis is mainly the terminology, but also the architecture, the algorithms, the process. But a lot of the terminology is actually different words, but means very similar stuff to the likes of oscillators, operators, carriers, modulators, stuff like that. So we'll look over the terminology. We'll then have a look at all that in action, and we'll try and make it, again, the reason that this DX7 is the ultimate FM synthesis, isn't it? It's what started the FM wave back in the 80s, and everything is more or less derived from that in terms of its FM algorithms, its architecture, and that was the leader, really, wasn't it? That was the Yamaha DX7. There's DX11, there's DX9, I think, but this is a really fantastic emulation. You can get this on an individual, but you can also get it as part of the bundle. I'd probably go for the bundle because it's crazy how much value you get in there. Then, once we've learned all of those things, probably hoping for about just before halfway through, we're going to start to look at building 3 different types of patches using FM synthesis. And we're going to look at building an FM bass, an FM pad, and an FM lead. And then we'll wrap things up at the end and conclude and do a little Q&A if anyone has any questions. So, we're on that note. If you do have any questions that are related to what I'm talking about, I'll try and catch them or I'll answer them in the last sort of 5-10 minutes. If you have anything that's sort of unrelated or just a bit too big to discuss in this stream, feel free to join on the Discord as always, because there's always a chance to have interaction on there, and also we can try and base a stream around it. So with that said, I look forward to getting into this week's stream. So here we go. So we have spent a couple of weeks looking at subtractive synthesis, and we did an advanced sound design series, again based around synthesis, and we also did stuff on wavetable, a little bit of we did an advanced one where it covered everything. Really briefly touched on some FM stuff. But FM synthesis, what is it? So FM stands for frequency modulation. I remember a while ago thinking I knew what FM synthesis was because I knew what FM, the abbreviated term, stood for. I knew it stood for frequency modulation, but again, there's no embarrassment to break down this terminology, but FM stands for frequency modulation. All that means is basically frequency waves moving and vibrating over the course of time. And it's about how you modulate those frequency waves. So FM is the process of generating and creating complex timbres and soundscapes and tonalities by modulating the frequency of one sound source with another sound source. So as opposed to subtractive synthesis, where we are using typically something like an LFO. So an LFO is what basically wobbles and moves the sound over time like an oscillator. As opposed to using an LFO as a modulator, we're going to use basically an oscillator to modulate an oscillator. So that's what really happens within frequency modulation. And what happens is once you increase the overall level of we'll just stick with the word oscillator for now, but we will be changing that. Once you change the rate and the level of the oscillator that is modulating the other oscillator, it becomes basically inaudible to the human ear, and that is when you get into creating new timbres and sounds, and basically that is what the FM sound is almost. We'll discover that when we start to create patches with the layering, but there's elements to a sound within FM, and really FM is all about layering. In the DX7 view here we've got OPs, these are operators, we have up to 6 here, and essentially we're just layering these sounds using different algorithms, and when you layer them you want to think about creating this sound creating the sound in different sort of areas. So I had a nice little description. So transient pluck sound, something that the DX7 is really well known for, is sort of like those 80s bass sounds that cut through the mix extremely well. And then there's the body of the sound, and then there's the sort of evolving tail of it, the resonance. And you get all of that via these different operators. So that's what FM synthesis is. I would say to people who are completely unfamiliar with it and coming up from a subtractive synthesis background, if you're familiar with that, think of it like this, okay? Think of FM like a typical LFO modulator. So an LFO, like I said, anyone who has experience with stuff like serum, pigments, vital, anything like that, you probably used an LFO, I'm pretty sure. So think of FM like a typical LFO modulation applied to an oscillator. it is essentially vibrating the sound waves over time. And by using an oscillator as a modulator instead of an LFO, you are only going to hear that oscillator, the effect of the oscillator, through what is known as an operator. So in FM, we use OP operators, as we can see in here in the DX7. And basically, operators are exactly the same thing as oscillators, but it has a different workflow to it. And there's also slightly different FM meanings now within the virtual route, because basically FM used to be just using sine waves, but now we have a lot more capabilities, as we can see here. Pretty cool. When the vibrato is imperceivable to the human ear, when the rate and the level is very high, it creates a timbre that is really unique, and that's how we get these otherworldly sounds that are impossible to recreate with the likes of subtractive or wavetable synthesis, stuff like that. Even modular synth, unless you have FM capabilities within certain modular routing. So FM is really useful for complex attack sounds. Famous examples being electric, bell, mallet, pianos. You'll know the kind of meal from sort of like 80s tracks. And the ROM bass patch, if anyone's familiar with that. So I would say that FM is not necessarily warm, it's not analog, of course it is digital, but you can also use it to create pads as well. So another thing before we just jump in here is FM exists in the real world without having any sort of synthetic engine. When you strike, say, a bell or a cymbal or even a guitar string, the energy is traveling through the metal as transversal waves, the way that it crosses two sound points in time. And those waves bounce off the edges and create modulation much the same way as an FM algorithm. So basically, if you were to hit something with something else, you are really going to hear the sound of one sort of sound source affecting the other, rather than hearing the two of them together. So that is the basic concept with FM, is frequency modulation. You're using one operator and basically it's modulating the other operator. I'm just looking in the chat. Apparently, something not great about the audio. That's annoying. I'm wondering if that's made any difference at all. I had a compressor on my vocal to try and tame some peaks, but I doubt it was that, to be honest. But hopefully that might be better. But I'm not aware of anything I can do as of now, unfortunately. Let me know if it's any better. And we will get into it. I'll try and do as much playing as talking from now. So, one of the huge benefits of FM is, although it has a very, very complex algorithm and schematics are behind it, really, it's actually incredibly low on CPU. So in the past couple of weeks, we've been doing some stuff with wavetable synthesis, and it can get really, really heavy on the old CPU, to the point where I think the last week it was like, I think it was making something in serum and pigments, and just one patch was pushing my CPU, and this is quite a strong processor. So it's very, very CPU light, but also the main thing is just the complex numbers you make with an FM. So that's the cool thing about it. Drawbacks is it's not like subtractive. I'd say with subtractive, you can sort of, if you have a sound in your head that you're imagining, you want to translate it and quickly create it using all of the different filters and oscillators and LFOs, you can get that sound that's in your head onto paper quite quick. FM is almost like modular, and it's a little bit unexpected. Less so in the ability to repatch, but more so you don't really know what you're going to get based on different algorithms. So we will explore the algorithms right now. So we have the terminology that we need to cover, which is basically we have the operators. And the operators are basically, think of them as our oscillators here. As we see, we have one here, and it's even labeled as an oscillator. What is different over an operator versus an oscillator is basically operator is its own mini synthesizer with all of the things you would typically see in a dedicated synth. So each one of these operators has a waveform oscillator, it has an envelope, it has a filter, it has polyphony controls and monophonic controls. So it's quite a bit more powerful in terms of its individual oscillators or operator. So we want to get used to using the right terminology to fit the right type of synthesis. So an operator is like an oscillator, but it's like the entire synth almost in one thing. We call that an operator. Then the carrier and the modulator. Basically, if you see this down here, Yamaha gave these, on the DX7, they gave these routing chains for the DX7, because this is where it gets complicated, is the concept that basically we see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's all the operators here, and this shows the workflow. So it shows that 6 has, we'll ignore this for now, but 6 has basically a feedback loop, that outer box, but 6 is modulating in 5, 4, and 3, and 2 is modulating 1, and ultimately what we'll hear is these main 2 operators at the bottom here, which is 1 and 3. If we change, now we can see it's creating different algorithms, and there's different ways you can use the algorithms. If you want to hear operators as well as hear their frequency modulation capabilities, you can do that. So one cool thing is you can create sound and then just click through different algorithms. These are predefined, so you can't go in and drag them around and change them yourself. But you can change the algorithms once you've got a good sound, and then sort of keep changing the sound to something else as you've already designed it, which is really good. It's like not too destructive. You just go through different algorithms. I think there might be something like 16 here, but that is one of the main principles of the architecture of the DX7 and other FM synthesis. Same with the FM8, it has a very, very similar architecture in the routing, but you have a little bit more control on that over where you're going to define what is going to be a carrier, what is going to be a modulator, what is going to be an operator, what you're going to hear from, essentially. So they're both good for that reason, because we can illustratively see what's going on. Cool. And then basically we just want to look at, we've got our operators covered, and then the modulators are basically whichever operator you're going to use to modulate another one. And that's really simple, because you have a nice we have a nice way of viewing everything here, and we can control individual envelopes for each operator in this view, or we can control it here, and we can control our ratios here, which is the amount that the frequency modulation is going to affect the other operator. I think it can sound so confusing. Once you start building a pack, it makes way, way more sense. So with that said, I think just following along my workflow here, but we've covered the benefits, the drawbacks as well. It's not quite as quick as getting an intuitive sound in your head out. We're going to be using the DX7 and FM, but we do have Yuki, Basil, and a selection of wavetables since you can use for future. Operator, oscillator, plus its own envelope, so it's basically it's its own mini oscillator. Carriers and modulators, we've just discovered them, and then the algorithm matrix, which is predefined here with collection, but in FMA we can get a little bit more into that. So hopefully that's made sense. Anyone feels like there's just something that they'd like to cover again, drop something in and I can come back to it at the end. But let's get making sound and just seeing stuff like this in action. So OP1, this is operator 1, and this is using a sine wave. Now, historically, FM synthesis use sine waves, and it's not too different, to be honest, from additive synthesis, because additive synthesis uses sine waves and partials to create sounds, and this is the same concept, essentially, apart from you're not hearing all the individual sine waves, are you hearing an operator being modulated by other operators, but they were using all sine waves, but now in this digital era, that is fantastic. Look, we got all of these different waveforms that we can use as well. So really, really cool. We have a lot of capabilities to make some great sounds there. But we'll stick with sine wave for the very first operator, just because I think everyone's sort of familiar with it. We can shape the envelope here, or we can go into the envelope tab and we can shape the envelope even further. This here is just a global volume, so we can hear the operator. Now here's a second operator, and with this operator we can hear that it doesn't sound like a sine wave at all, does it? We don't hear it anymore, even though the level of it is up. And that is because if we look at the mod matrix, it's slightly different. If we look at the algorithm, 2 is the modulator in this case. It's modulating 1. Think of OP2 as almost like LFO. We can't hear it unless we have OP1 there. So what we have here is we have a sine wave oscillator, but we're going to say a sine wave operator because the whole synth here. We have that modulating operator 1, and that gives us this sound. So really, that's gone from a sine to almost like triangle, or quite a bit further than triangle. You get a lot more harmonics. If you had an oscilloscope or something like, you could see how this changes over time. But we could change that sound even more using envelopes and by stacking and layering. So that's a big, big part of the process. So think about when you're building patches in rule of 3. Number 1, layers. So you want to be thinking, do you need to use all 6? If so, then go ahead. And also, when it comes to using them, you don't have to worry about that CPU usage. And the more you use, the more harmonically and feature rich and the more interesting the timbre of the sound is going to be. Then you want to think about which algorithm you want to use. You'll actually start to understand which algorithm will fit which sort of sound. And then lastly, you are going to want to think about the envelopes and the shaping of the individual operators. So again, hope it's not getting too confusing, but let's just continue with the theme here. So we'll go back to operator 1. We got our sine wave, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to start changing this because I want to try and go for some sort of bass sound, let's say. Let's have a look at, we can tune the bass down within the incremental values here. So this is like a coarse frequency, and this is a fine frequency. Good to see someone's playing along on a real DX7 or an emulation. Either way, that's super cool. So I've tuned that down to 0.5 on coarse value just to get a little bit lower. And let's have a look at what else we have here. We have some cool controls like a filter and the velocity sensitivity we're going to use a lot when we go along and layer. But this sine wave is the fundamental of the sound essentially. So we're going to keep that where it is. Let's go in the envelopes. What you want to do is, in order to get that FM sound that we know from the DX7, we want to change this filter on this first operator and for the rest of them, to be honest, for this bass sound, to the DX7 wave. And now it's just a case of changing the envelope shape. So you can hear we're getting rid of the attack a little bit there. Quite like the clicky sound. We have a rate and then we have level control as well for the actual amplitude of the envelope. So again, I'm just going to do a bit of shaping. I want it to be quite a tight sound. So this is much like ADSR, but it's just using slightly different parameters and control, but we can even see this sort of sustain point. Okay, cool. Let's bring in our second operator and go back to this view, and we can control the level here. So when we control the level, this means you are controlling how much this operator is actually modulating operator 1. We're not controlling the volume of that operator. We're controlling the actual value that it is modulating operator 1. Cool. I'm going to pitch this down again. Cool. I'm going to go with, again, quarter down tune. So that is a sound there that would be quite difficult to create using even a complex waveform in a wavetable view. Okay, cool. I'm going to change the velocity sensitivity. So what this does is it means that the velocity will bring out the feature of this operator the more I dig in. So for example, if I really bring it all the way to 7, you're mainly hearing operator 1, you're not hearing the operator 2 modulating function unless you dig in. So we'll bring that back to about 2. Okay, cool. Again, we can shape in here, but we just get a little bit more control if we go in the envelope. So one of the great things about FM is because an operator is its own mini synth essentially with the oscillator and the envelope, we are getting a lot of control over each individual sound and that is what creates such unique sounds. So as we can hear, we can totally change the sound of operator 2 using the envelope, which we wouldn't normally be able to do. What's nice is we can see the lines of the previous curve as well, as you can see in the background. Excellent. Okay, back to the overview. Operator 3. I'm just going to stick with sine waves basically for this first example. Reason being, the sine wave when they're stacked can basically recreate almost any sound because of the way the harmonics get created and the way that the operators modulate each other. So sine waves really are the essence of how all of the waveforms are created. Okay, cool. I'm going to leave that one where it is. Increase the velocity sensitivity. Back into the envelope again. Just going to make this a slightly tighter sound as it's brighter. Okay, excellent. We can change the values here. That's giving it a lot more like upper mid-range sound when it's, again, this is all being fed through 1 and then 6 is being fed through 5, 4 and into 3. Okay, cool. Operator 4. Let's go back in our envelope. What I'm going to do with this one is I'm going to actually pitch it up. I'm going to pitch it up 2. We can even turn on this filter. I'm going to pitch it up 0.5 as opposed to 2 and get rid of the filter because I like the sound of it, but not all the way up 2 octave ranges. Okay. Okay, I'm going to bring that sound down. Okay, excellent. Operator 5. Let's go through some different waveforms here. So just to show you how the different waveforms affect the sound. Now we're into the sine wave. Just as we were saying, we're sticking with the sound for now. Okay, and again, I'm sort of using similar shapes. And again, don't forget, you can always change these filters as well. I think for these kind of sounds, you get a little bit more control of that DX7 filter. We're only touching the iceberg here, though. I'm just going to go back and change these filters, actually, I've decided. This can be used as a really tight bass sound, and then you can layer it with something else. Cool. That's a cool sound. I'm just going back. Make sure that, I think that's the only one left that's not on Dig 7. It's almost 70s cop show-esque. Cool. Operator 5, operator 6, our last operator. And in overview, same thing. I'm just going to pitch this one right up. Okay. Excellent. And again, back into the envelope. You can do this by hand, by the way, or you can dial in the actual precise value. It's completely up to you. So there we go. That gave a big edge to the sound there in terms of its attack. So once you get this stage, you can start to mess about with the levels of the operators. Remember, you're not actually hearing the operator. You're hearing the operator affecting, more than likely, another operator. So we have frequency and ratio. When we change the ratio, we're basically changing the pitch, again, the frequency more or less, but this will change the sound again because it's changing the sound of that operator, and again, that operator is being used as either a modulator or a carrier in most cases. Obviously not the case for operator 1. So start change some of these. So I'm changing that ratio there. What that's doing is it's going back to that idea of LFOs and vibrating sound waves over time. Once it goes so fast, it's imperceivable to the human ear. So there we're hearing it's a new timbre, but the sound is moving so fast through the air, the rate of it, that our ear can no longer detect that it's classed as vibrato, really. And then you can mess around with these levels. And they all add a different characteristic. I'm going to leave that one quite low down. It's very light tuning by ear. Go back to envelope and go to your pitch envelope. And here we're going to do a little bit of shaping. Now this is really cool. So this pitch is global. So this is affecting all of the individual operators. So how powerful is FM in terms of sound design? FM is way more powerful than wavetables could be, than subtractive could be. It's more complex, basically. So we can start the waveform at its max value here, and that means you're going to get basically almost like a pit glide, aren't you? Really, really cool. We could do the opposite. We could start here. We could also use the DX7 pitch. Again, it's completely up to you. It's a personal thing. We'll go back to this one. There's also just ones that you can sort of default to, almost like presets. So this is where you get into creating crazy sounds with FM. I mean, if this doesn't make you smile, you're probably making music when you shouldn't be. So that's pitch the overall level up, but let's just bring the entire height of this down. That was actually the wrong carrier, but never mind. Just trying to think about, again, it's one of them things where if you could think it, probably not going to translate it in the way you'd expect to with subtractive synthesis. I'd rather just try something like this. So you can create basically ramps with your pitch value over time. I wonder how many values there is here. And I think again within these you have to shape the sound yourself. So we'll stick with what we had, but don't forget you can use the pitch there for more likes. We haven't got the time to look at that day. We'll be looking at a pad next or something. But use the global pitch envelope to create more sound effects sort of things. Okay, sounds pretty cool. Let's put it into mono mode. Okay, this has changed a lot from how it was at the start. Don't forget that just because it's FM doesn't mean we can't use some more effects. Chorus. Okay, these controls here are macros. We could assign them if we want certain things, but we've got something that's working now. Now, what I said at the start was once you get a sound with FM, you can change the algorithm, and you can continuously change that. You actually get a little bit more control in FM8 and other things over the routing. You get sort of like Yamaha's version emulation here of what they gave in the 80s, which was this sort of like a prescribed routing chain because it was so confusing to people because FM had never existed. So let's just go through different routing chains and hear how the sound changes. So this is what we got then. Not bad, yeah, pretty cool sound for what was quick. How much does that change going from 1 to 3? That's because if we can see now, 3 is modulating and 2 is modulating coming out of 1, but the actual routing flow of the mathematics has changed. And when I dig in more, I get more of those velocities. Let's keep going. It's just loads of options. That's quite rich. So we're hearing 1 and 3 as the main operator carrier. Much like number 1. And you'll find as you go through, you get different sounds every single time. Oh, there's more than I thought. Cool. And then if you go into your modulation, this is much like your traditional mod matrix. You can assign things here as you'd expect. You can usually do. There's also an arpeggiator here. We can change the rate. Put a hold mode on it. Pretty cool. And then again, if we go to the effects, if you look at my CPU, it is never budged. For what is so complex, I guess because it's not trying to do any analog emulations of waveforms or anything, because digital uses hardly anything really. It's just so light. Let's go into the old destroy. So we've got a clipper in here. A lot of FM synthesis is great for stuff like cinematic sound design as well. Let's change the, well, I guess it's the wet control, but just the actual overall decay time is what I was looking for. I mean, it's basically just like something off a film trailer, you know? You just need the Netflix sort of voiceover. 2319, we have something coming in. And it's a patch that's being created from scratch. Really, really cool sound. Sounds really rich. Just this major analog chorus. We have our types here, which is cool as well. I love the buzz you get off that initial oscillator. So that just started as one operator, then we have the 6 operators. And then we gone in and just shaped it really, and I changed the algorithms. That's the cool thing is, once you've got a sound, it doesn't stop there. It's not destructive either. If I went back to 1, it's exactly the same thing I had at start, and I haven't lost anything about it at all, really. Let's just put a compressor on here, and then that's a really cool sound. Ah, it's a brilliant sound. Love it. If I was to use this in a performance thing, I would assign modulators or something like effects controls to the macros, and then you could automate them within your performance and change them over time. Pretty cool. You can put the portamento on, change the time. And again, let's just keep going through and changing the sound, because that is a cool sound, but how does it continuously change? It's very otherworldly, I think. You can quickly change the sound as well by just changing the coarse value of your operators. Okay, and then how could you shape this sound further? Because like I said, this is just such a lovely way to constantly evolve over time. Well, you could change the rapidly change the shape of envelopes for different operators. this is not going to ever translate to how I've heard it in my head. It's so different in that sense. It's not like a traditional way you would expect a shape to sound, but how's this sound? We have a digital audio conversion right here. Vintage just smoothens out the waveform slightly. Cool. Last thing I would do with this sound before we move on is go into my global pitch and just do something for fun. Try this. Pretty cool. I mean, world's your oyster, do as much as you want. You could do that. You could maybe invert that. There's so many things you could do. You could make a loop backwards and forwards. It's a really, really fun thing. I absolutely love working with FM sounds. You can see how this has been used for sound effects in films. There's a siren, you know. Pretty cool. See someone just joined the chat. Struggling with understanding FM as far as operators go. Okay. I don't know if you were here, but we did cover it at the start, so you could maybe go back and watch the stream. If not, I can answer it in the end, sort of little Q&A. But it's really quite simple to understand. So there we go. Really cool sound. Really, really fun. It's just such a hugely advanced form of synthesis. So DX7, awesome emulation. FM8, this thing looks prehistoric. It looks... Well, by the way, this is just a lovely example to show how crazily quick you can build fantastic pitches, but that is exactly what we started with in DX7. I mean, what a transformation. It's just amazing. I really think you couldn't have created anything like that with Wavedibble, even if you went to great depths with it. You just can't get them timbres, really. It's not possible. Okay, so FM8. FM8 is basically Native Instruments version, and this one is really good, even though it's dated and looks absolutely ancient. They could probably update it, but then again, massive. So if it ain't broke, it was working well. Why change it? You can see the operators here in the FM matrix. You can basically control the routing a little bit more here. In that DX7, you have a much more sort of regimental approach to the algorithms, if you know what I mean. So here you do have more control over the way you affect the modulation of carriers and the way they're sending to operators. Easier to just show it. So here is F. A through F, by the way, in FM8 is operators. And then down here you've got like a noise and a filter curve, which is what we just looked at. So here I just do this. I just increase a value, and now E is basically going to modulate F. We have our ratio, which is what we changed at the end here, which is the frequencies modulation, basically the frequencies pitch over time. So how different that sounds now, even though they're both two oscillators, two sine waves, sounds very different with sine wave, because we have a sine wave working as an operator, and we have a sine wave working as a modulator and a carrier to modulate the other one. So what we're actually hearing is F. We could hear both if we like. So now we're hearing E as a modulator, but also as its own mini synth, basically the operator. But again, the power in FM is using it as its own frequency modulation sort of characteristics. That's cool. Let's start do something we didn't do before, and we'll start looking at different waveforms. So drop down menu, sine, let's try a square. Very, very, very different. Okay. Now this is where it starts to get fun. Let's do D at multiple points. So here, D is working as a carrier, and it is working as a modulator to modulate E, and it's also modulating F, but that's after he's modulating F. It's easier to just see it, really, isn't it? Let's go to D. And again, software. Just changing the waveforms here. I have to right click on it, by the way. There we go. And I can change the level. Very, very cool. Just get a bit of wave folding and stuff happening there. Okay, let's start to change our ratios. So F is currently locked at its 1 ratio. Let's start to change these ratios values. You can do this by pushing up or just pressing here. Okay, cool. We have an envelope here, by the way, for these waveforms. And let's change D. Pretty cool. And what I'm going to do is change ratio, just to show you how crazy you can get. So 1 is the most common value. You can also invert the waves. Pretty cool things you can do here for such an old synth, actually. Okay, let's just do a little bit more stacking. Okay. Let's go from a sine to sawtooth. Actually, I might go to a triangle. Okay, cool. What I'm going to do is go into the master here. And here is sort of like a global control section after you've been the expert panel, is where you can do all of your FM matrix routing. And if you go into here, great way to learn is go into these. These are basically FM algorithms, which are predefined a bit like in the DX7, where you can basically try a matrix algorithm. Okay, cool. So we have our envelope, we have our amp mod, and then we can also control velocities like we did before, again, depending on your velocity when you're playing, which is really, really cool. Master. So something I like to use a lot here is I'm just going to bump the voices up and increase the detune, which is really cool. We have portamento. We can do a global pitch change as well, which is quite cool. ARP button up here, press this, get going straight with your ARP. And then this is where our patches are, so you can learn here, which is a really, really good thing. We have our global effects here, and then in the morph here we can have a global timbre LFO output control. I'm just going to boost some of these. And you can apply these to this morph curve, which is really, really cool. A global amplitude as well. I'm just going to shape this. Cool. I'm just looking here as a way of seeing different mods over time. So this is the envelopes for all of the different operators. This is the operator section as well. Modulation matrix, we'll leave that for today. And you can start to stack basically all of the different operators in different views, and you can change the waveforms again, just like you could in the DX7. That's the good thing, is you don't have the restriction of just a sine wave anymore. That's not the case. But we could also go a bit more wild here in terms of hearing different things. So just trying to build a really basic part here. Let's go and just add a couple of effects. Let's have a look. Okay, cool. I'm just going to let's have a look. Chorus. really, really quick patch just because I want to answer questions. I'm seeing them coming in because everything we're doing here is more or less like what we did, by the way, in the DX7. It's just a slightly different workflow, and we have a little bit more control. Love them control. Attributes, these are just little effects of the browser that we use to discover things. Arpeggiator, we'll not go into that for today. I was just looking at this before, but where you want to spend most of your time learning about FM is in actually the expert part, so don't be put off by that. This is where you want to learn your routing chains. So what I set up before will be defined, but I can change my routing now. So it's using all the same operators, it's using the same waveforms, nothing's changing. It's just controlling the routing. And that's a good way to learn what works, you know. I'm just going to use, so Z. I'm just using, I'm going to route this into Z, I think. Let's try a couple more of these and then I'll dive into some questions. So there we go, just a basic but quick pad using FM. Definitely different to a typical big, beefy analog pad with loads of voices. But we have a more like, I would almost describe it as sort of icy, you know, that digital sort of characteristic in the way the operators have been modulated. Cool sounds. What time are we on? Crikey, that flew by. Again, you know, I'm just using stuff that's built in here because I don't want to go too crazy, but you could use third-party effects and stuff to make this all sound wicked. I'm just going to bump this up, bump the polyphony up. Back into this mode. Some cool sounds. And we could even try it with an op. So, really, really advanced and crazy sounding sort of textures. I would say I definitely hit this point, and I feel like I do quite a lot as of recently. If you feel like you're starting to lose inspiration when it comes to sound design with your patches, with just like your overall processes, just I'll load up an oscillator and an LFO and I'll put on a cutoff on the filter and modulate. If you feel like you're getting repetitive, delve into FM. Because if you start exploring wavetables, sure, but it's subtractive synthesis just using a more feature-rich oscillator. Modulate, go for it. But FM's just different again. FM is where you're going to create probably always sort of trending, or like you can guarantee FM is being used in the pop hits of today. It's one of the most unique ways to get quirky, ear candy sounds and create really rich sounds, you know, when you think about, for example, Dua Lipa's producer, Ian Kirkpatrick, I believe that he uses like Razor and he uses stuff to, for example, what does he use? I think he uses like the DX7 ROM-based sound, and it's got that clicky, transient quality. It's got stuff you wouldn't get from subtractive synths, and I'm a huge fan of subtractive synths, but you can get stuck in a creative rut of doing the same things over and over, even with the presets. So don't be afraid to dip into what might seem like scary water, because really, FM is just like techniques and terminology, but flipped on its head from subtractive and used in a different approach, mainly in the routing, the architecture, and the way it happens. I can see absolutely loads of comments flying around in the comments today. So I'll answer stuff. We haven't had a great deal of people, but the comments have been absolutely flying around. So I might just quickly scan through and see what we have. So what was William C. Beckham? It's more important for allowing someone or something getting in the way of my dreams. Oh, crikey. A hiatus, a musical hiatus, possibly. I'll be bookmarking this one for sure. That's great to hear, Dave Mono. I know it's a lot to fly through in an hour. I try to do it as sort of slowly as possible. I remember someone asking something about operator, which you might try and find. Let Music Your Life. Try to rewatch the start when Brent explained the basics. Yeah, absolutely. I'm not sure who that's in reference to, but at the start I really just tried to take 20 minutes or so, hopefully not too dull, but you've sort of got to understand what things mean, just the words and the terminology around what an operator is, a carrier, modulator, stuff like that. And all of you guys are synth experts, so I know you'll already be able to pick this up. A lot of people saying they have FM but never used it. It's been around for so much time. FM is more complex. Yeah, DX7's the DX7 emulation here from Arterius is just awesome though. It's so good. We get the summon FM. Let's have a look. Someone asking about ring modulation, but Let Music Your Life is our own personal guest host by the looks of it. Sorry guys, I'm just scouting. Additive synthesis is linear. Yes, that's correct. Additive is quite similar in a way to some elements of FM synthesis in the way that it uses sine waves and builds them upon a frequency graph using partials. We did scan over additive actually in the advanced one. If you want to go back and have a look at that in the sound design playlist. Of course, if you have anything that you want to look at, you can drop that in at the Discord and we can just do a chat about it as well. It doesn't have to be a video. Mathematics. Don't worry about anything when people describe, and myself are describing FM as mathematics, because it's all to do with numbers and routing signals, but you don't really have a great deal of involvement with that. I still think the process is mostly creative, but it's good to predefine what sound you want before you go for it. So if you want a sound that sounds like this, eventually you'll start to understand, just like you learn just like you learn subtractive synthesis, FM will become sort of like quite natural. Yes, Hill, I don't know how you pronounce the name, I'm sorry, Hildia Godnutter. She did a fantastic score for Chernobyl, like the sound that I was creating at the start. I wouldn't be surprised if she maybe used stuff like this, because FM was used everywhere on stuff like cinematic sound design. Let's have a look. Struggling with understanding FM as far as operators going into other operators. Is one operator acting as an LFO for another operator FM? Swift Dreamer, you are bang on the money, yes. It's basically, you're not necessarily hearing operator 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Perhaps you are. You have to check your algorithm down here. So as you can see, we're hearing 1, 4, and 5 going to the direct stereo output or our sort of mix bus. But as we can see, 3, 2, and 6 are being used as modulators here. A little bit like an LFO, but when you use an operator which has its own oscillator and its own envelope and its own filter, that it becomes a much more feature and complex timbre when it is being used to modulate another operator. Confusing topic, but it makes sense if you just do it. I would suggest if all you guys are into this, just go and try and practice this basically on anything you have that you can do this with. Absolutely great for scoring. FM and subtractive are completely different. Jaws, but in space. There are so many different sound types and they just sound different. Yes, I would say the bass sound is probably really quickly. So probably one of the most famous sounds on the DX7. I'm just wondering this is the most famous sound. ROM piano and there's ROM bass, I'd say. So they have, because of the sound that happens, the timbre, when you get a operator modulating an operator, you get this really like glassy, plucky sound, and that's this. You can hear that's all sine waves though, I can still... sounds great. And then that's a cool sound actually. And lastly, moving fifth is rubbish. This one's basically almost. This is kind of what I was creating at the start, actually, come to think of it. I was just trying to show the process behind it. As you can see, we've got one operator as the output and everything else has been fed as a carrier or a modulator. People love that spacey sort of sound that the bass turned into. I have a question. What kind of sound recreations are best left for FM synthesis? Your sound effects are going to sound way cooler in here. If you want to go back and look at how I was using a global envelope to create like pitch curves, that is a really cool thing to look at, basically. And FM is great for I even made a list. Useful for definitely sounds with that complex attack sound. It's almost like loading a sample into a subtractive engine or a granular engine where you're using it for the bite. Bells, mallets, bass patches with a lot of attack, and also it's just brilliant for sound effects and stuff like that. The counselor, you're sounding way better than what. At least you're following along. I'm sure you're getting something going, which is awesome. Great. I think that is more or less everything. If anyone else has any questions, you can let me know on the the group chat on Discord, and I'll try and pick it up. But that was really fun. Just quickly, I've been looking at the other comments. It was such a great. Yeah, the Artery of V collection is fantastic. Where the last comments are that you already read. Yeah, the effects collection, correct. The effects collection is awesome. Let's see. Yeah, the DX7 back in the 80s and 90s there. You can pick them up now for pretty affordable prices, actually, to be honest. Okay. Anyone know how did your very non-visual person how to use Discord? Oh, okay. That's interesting. I'm not sure about that. I don't know if maybe they have some help maybe on Discord side, but if you're interested in joining the server, join it, because there's a sound design channel, there's a mixing channel, a mastering channel, giveaway channel, all these sort of things. Call for submissions if you want to get your mixes heard. I've just looked at the time, this one ran away, but hopefully everyone has enjoyed that one. Really fun, really big, deep rabbit hole to go down in terms of sound design exploration and just learning new terminology. I hope everyone feels that they've got a basic understanding. If not, go back and watch it as many times as you need to. All about operators, carriers, modulators, algorithms. Completely different, isn't it, to subtractive and granular and wavetables, but that was mega fun. I really enjoyed it, guys. I hope you did too. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them here or leave them in the Discord. The link's right there. As you can see, ADSR music production tutorials. And I'll catch you next week for what I think might be a fun one, like a special one. So have a great week, guys. I shall see you next week.